For 200 years, the smartest people in Spain looked at the bullfight and saw the same thing. The soul of the nation. Garcia Lorca called it a religious mystery, the victory of spirit over matter. Ortega y Gasset said you cannot write the history of Spain without it. Poets, philosophers, entire generations of intellectuals, staring into the ring and finding they were certain the deepest truth about who Spaniards are. They disagreed about almost everything else. Some said the bullfight proved Spain was too primitive, too closed off from Europe. Others said it proved Spain was still pure, still itself, resisting a modern world that had lost its nerve. Unamuno thought it made the country stupid. Machado thought attacking it meant attacking Spain itself. But underneath the argument, they all agreed on one thing. This ritual meant something ancient and essential. Here is the inconvenient fact none of them wanted to look at. The fighting bull, the specific, bred, dangerous animal in that ring, is not ancient. As a deliberately bred creature, it goes back at most 200 years. Some breeds barely 100. The tradition they were calling eternal was, by the standards of Spanish history, practically brand new. So if it wasn't ancient mysticism, what actually built it and kept it alive for 3 centuries? Not poetry, not the soul of a nation, something far less romantic and far more interesting. Money. Follow it, and the whole legend falls apart. Let me show you who actually kept the bullfight alive, because it is not who you'd expect. In 1744, the priest of a Madrid parish had a problem. His church's tabernacle, seats, and floor were, in his own words, in indecent condition. He needed money for repairs. His solution? He petitioned the crown for the right to hold bullfights. He was not unusual. This happened constantly, all over Spain, for 200 years. A parish in Toledo wanted bullfights to fix a hermitage. A church in Huelva wanted them to finish an altarpiece. A monastery near Andújar found that 12 bullfights weren't enough money, so it asked for 32 more. One religious congregation requested them simply to feed its own needy brothers. And it wasn't only the church. Hospitals in Madrid and Valencia didn't just benefit from bullfights. They owned the bull rings outright and fought fiercely to protect that monopoly. Town councils used the proceeds to repair collapsing buildings, pave streets, and in one town, to cover a stagnant creek that was making people sick every summer. A colonial viceroy in Peru even proposed funding a homeless shelter in Lima this exact same way. Think about that list again. Churches, hospitals, town governments, a colonial administration. These are not the institutions of ancient myth and tragic poetry. These are the people who needed a functioning roof and clean water, and found, quite reasonably, that watching a bull die on a Sunday was extremely good at raising cash. Now here is where it gets genuinely clever, and it tells you everything about how power actually works. The crown in Madrid frequently disliked the bullfight. Officials wrote, more than once, that it was crude, that it offended the soft customs of a cultured nation, and they granted the permits anyway. Almost every single time. Why would a government keep approving something it found distasteful? Because it had found something more valuable than good taste. A way to fund public projects without raising a single tax. A historian studying this called it exactly right. Bullfight permits worked like a modern government lottery. A comfortable alternative to taxation. The crown got roads paved, hospitals staffed, and churches rebuilt, and never had to write a law that took a peso out of anyone's pocket directly. This is the part the poets never wrote about, because it isn't tragic or beautiful. It's a bureaucratic trick. Let the public volunteer to pay, entertained, rather than force them to pay. Resentful. One official in Cadiz even defended it in exactly that language. It doesn't burden the public, he wrote, and it sustains a firmness of character superior to every other nation. Grand words, doing the same job as a receipt. So the institution that Ortega y Gasset called the key to understanding 4 centuries of Spanish history was at the exact same time functioning as an off-the-books municipal budget. Both things were true. Only one of them was ever put in a poem. By the late 19th century, this had stopped being an occasional fundraiser and become a full industry. And once you see it as an industry, all the mysticism drains out fast. Look at the raw growth. In the 1860s, Spain held roughly 400 bullfights a year. By 1895, more than 700. By 1912, over 800. That is not the graph of a sacred, unchanging ritual. That is the growth chart of a booming commercial sector. More rings built, more ranches raising bulls at higher prices, more fighters commanding bigger fees, and an entire specialized press built just to cover the business gossip and rivalries inside it. And underneath the poetry, it behaved exactly like any industry fighting over turf. Aristocratic corporations called maestranzas were handed royal monopolies on bullfighting in whole cities. When one Sevilla businessman tried to run his own bullfights and build his own ring without permission, he lost in court and was forced to tear the ring down himself. This wasn't a clash of philosophies. It was a licensing dispute. Bullfighters became employees, fought over like assets. In 1793, a Madrid hospital commission, the one that owned the bull ring, found itself short of talent and wrote directly to Sevilla's maestranza demanding the release of a fighter under contract, citing the privilege of the court. Strip away the costumes and the crowd, and you are reading a labor dispute between 2 corporations over an exclusive contract. Let me end where the myth reached its purest form. August 1947, a town called Linares. A bull named Islero Gores, the most famous bullfighter alive, Manuel Rodriguez, Manolete. He dies the next morning, 30 years old. Spain reacts like it has lost a head of state. Special newspaper editions. 20,000 people file past his body. A telegram arrives from Franco himself. The New York Times runs the story. Years later, the novelist Carlos Fuentes made a pilgrimage to that same ring and wrote something extraordinary. The bullfighter was 30, he said. The bull was 2,000. Meaning 2,000 years of Spanish tradition distilled into that single animal. Manolete, he wrote as the unconscious heir to Seneca, to El Greco, to the poetry of Lorca himself. Spain's whole soul gored in one afternoon. It is beautiful writing, and by the historian's own reckoning, it is close to backwards. That bull, as a bred fighting animal, was at most 200 years old. Its specific bloodline, the Mura Ranch, only about 100. Not 2,000 years of unbroken destiny. One bull from 100-year-old cattle operation in an industry built by parish priests paying for roof repairs and a crown that preferred selling tickets to raising taxes. So which story is true? The eternal soul of a nation or the fundraiser that grew into an empire? Both stories were being told at the very same moment, about the very same afternoon. One of them made it into the poems. The other one is sitting, in plain sight, in the account books nobody thought to romanticize. That is usually where the real story is hiding. Not in the version people wanted to be true, but in the ledger no one bothered to lie in.